legacy of the lightkeepers is difficult to actually quantify, but they made such a huge amount of difference. The lives of everyone who had occasion to sail around the coast, fishermen from small fishing boats to ocean-going liners. In the 1700s and the early 1800s, the amount of shipwrecks around the coast of Ireland was absolutely incredible. I read somewhere that there's an estimated 120,000 shipwrecks are lying off the coast of Ireland. And when the lighthouses started to light up the coasts from about the early 1800s onwards, there was a huge improvement in the life expectancy of a sailor, for one, and all of the traders who were able to get their goods safely in and out of shore, safely in and out of harbours. It just improved things for everybody. Well, my name is Peter Goulding. I'm just after turning 60. I live down in Dublin 15, not far from the border with County Meath. I actually go for a pint in County Meath. And in my leisure time, I write humorous verse. I play the electric guitar, and I'm also interested in lighthouses. I have a blog about lighthouses, which I started in 2007 to try and record everywhere I'd seen. Everywhere I go, I would take a photo of it. Also to try to show people how to find it. If you go down a country road and you take a wrong road, then you end up in somebody's farmhouse or something, and you have to turn around and go all the way back. So as the time evolved, I got into the history of lighthouses, into the need to try and record maritime heritage. There's lighthouses out there that have fallen into the sea or have been dismantled, and you try and find a photograph of it. Particularly now, as all of the lighthouses are kind of automated and some of them are no longer working and they're just standing there. I've also expanded from lighthouses now to keepers. I blog about lightships, anything that has to do with subject of navigational lights and who operates them and all of that. I'm also trying to write a book on fatalities at Irish lighthouses. Fairly sombre as a subject. I have about 55 instances of it. The keepers, the ferrymen who used to ferry supplies to lighthouses, families of keepers, kind of long forgotten by anyone except the immediate family. These kind of folk, they went out of the way to kind of try and improve safety for everybody. Ended up paying the ultimate price. So I'm simply trying to tell a story to highlight a few of the lighthouses aren't often in spotlights. There's a certain few that seem to get a lot of the limelight. A hell of a lot of lighthouses never get a mention. Well, the construction of a fastnet, which is down off the southwest coast of Ireland, is amazing. The logistics and the engineering is incredible. There's a lovely story about the boy and the girl who lived on the Maiden's lighthouses off the coast of Antrim, and they were forbidden from seeing each other, and they had to converse through a carrier pigeon and eventually eloped. Alexander Mitchell, the blind engineer, lighthouses on sandy surfaces. He was completely blind, but he was able to hop into water and check all of the materials. I think my favourite, though, is probably the story of Calf Rock, which was a lighthouse off the coast of Cork. You see a stump of a lighthouse on a rock about a quarter of a mile offshore. And it's incredible to think that that was a fully grown kind of tower, and it got knocked down by waves after 20 years of existence in 1881. There were 6 fellas on a rock there at a time. It's only a tiny rock, and amazingly all of them survived because they were all in the lower areas of the tower. The seas were so rough that it took a week and a half for a ship to get near enough for 6 of them in order to make a running jump into a boat. It was quite an incredible kind of a story. When you see the stump and you think a wave has just crashed it over, it's incredible. There are some beautiful lighthouses all around the country. One down in Dunmore East in County Waterford is absolutely beautiful, but you never hear of it. Some of them, are interesting, but some of them are not particularly remarkable or great. And there are others that are much more of a story to actually tell. What I try to do in a blog is to go into things a little bit more, explain things, try and unearth quirky facts about each of them in order to bring into the public perception. What I find is guidebooks about lighthouses. Some of them have errors, and the errors get repeated until they are accepted as fact, and then everybody quotes them. That's a very dangerous sort of thing from a historical point of view. So I try to find out what the actual story is. I try and check every fact just to ensure that I have it right and it isn't simply hearsay. Well, wife enjoys when we go down and hunt out lighthouses, because, it brings you off the beaten track. She is kind of very supportive. I can't really say anything. There are quite a few who email me, who inform me that they have a lighthouse keeper in the family, and they know he was a lightkeeper in the 1800s. And I kind of start to get interested in the story of a particular family. A lot of the families of the keepers are actually generation to generation, so you can get 4 or 5 generations of the lighthouse keepers. It's great to have someone who shares my enthusiasm for the subject. The other sort of person I have met is when I am researching. I'm trying to find out something about it. They're the ones who are very much keeping local history alive insofar as every area around the coast, and also, I suppose, inland, seems to have a local history organisation, association, society, which has a social media page. So if I'm trying to find out something about a light, I will go and ask the people who have a local knowledge. And they often lead me off on tangents. I've become a lot more interested now in general maritime history as opposed to only lights. And some of them have really fascinating stories. And there is a guy down in Cheap Point, just outside of Waterford, who has been extremely helpful, a local historian. And he often does the same. He will get in touch and ask me about something, which really makes me feel important, even though I'm not. Well, first of all, how many lighthouses are there around the coast of Ireland? Normally, most of the textbooks will tell you around 70. But they're kind of only the ones which are run by the Commissioner of Irish Lights. It doesn't include any harbour lights which are run by local harbour boards. So the figure is more likely to be more up around the 130 mark, I'd say. Of course, it all depends on what your definition of a lighthouse is. Everybody has a different definition. It's a substantial substantial tower structure that was specifically built as a navigational light and I think you really should be able to get inside it. I'm not a big fan of these skeletal lighthouses, which is basically a light on the top of an electrical pylon. So I'd say there's roughly 130. The tallest is a fastnet lighthouse, 177 feet, 54 metres. It's down off the southwest coast of Ireland. It was built between 1898 and 1904, took 6 years, had a special ship constructed in order to convey granite blocks. All the granite blocks were assembled in Cornwall, made of the granite from Cornwall, and shipped over to Crookhaven, where they were all unloaded and then shipped out to the Fastnet. The oldest lighthouse is Hook Head. There are stories that there was a monk in the 6th century who came over here with St Patrick from Wales and saw a shipwreck there down on the Hook Peninsula, so he decided to build a fire there every night. Now, according to a legend, it was tended every night for 600 years, but I doubt there's very much evidence of that. We know there was a tower built at Hook 1100s, and there was definitely a fire on top of it as a warning to ships from 1192. It's been shining ever since, and with the exception of about 100 years after the dissolution of the monasteries by Henry VIII in the 1500s. It's actually one of the oldest lighthouses in the world. The one that took the longest, the actual construction of it in the most inaccessible sort of spots, like Fastnet, like in Tira, which is one of the Blasket Islands, they would often take around 5 or 6 years, because it was very dependent on the weather. Could they get the crews? Could they get the materials over to the islands? Mainly for 8 months of a year, it was impossible to actually land on these islands because of the large swell. So that's why it simply took so long.